Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And today we are going to talk about the fact that 41 Busshead has been unalived, has been brutally murdered, and has joined one of the TikTokers who have fallen victim to the brutal and the gruesome murders that we are seeing in Jamaica. Now, this person, 41 Busshead, was murdered on his live, on his TikTok live. I understand that he had just finished a live on Instagram and had just started a live on TikTok when he was on a live, when he was brutally murdered by, uh, terrible assailant. Now, that is something that we have to be mindful of. I think that Jamaicans are now becoming desensitized, as it were, to the high murder rate that we have in Jamaica. And I think that if we do not put this TikTok under control, the saga, the unfortunate incidents that have been happening recently, I think if we do not put some sort of control over those events, and if the Jamaican government does not try to regulate the use of social media and the behavior, regulate the behavior, not the speech. And let me be very clear on that. I do not wish that the government regulate speech, right, and suppress freedom of speech. What I would ask the government to do is to regulate unwholesome speech, speech that threatens the lives of another individual, and also the obscene language that is so pervasive on the app. I do not think that it's a good representation, that it's a good image. It does not formulate a good image of Jamaica. I hear the Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, suggesting that we are people who like to chat. So he's not going to regulate speech because we love to chat, even when we are suggesting that we're going to unalive you, that he considers that it's okay. It's freedom of speech. But that is not true. Freedom of speech comes with responsibility. In the same way in which I cannot just come and accuse you inappropriately of doing something that you know that you did not do, just accuse you willy-nilly and then suggest that, that's freedom of speech. No, that is not freedom of speech. That is irresponsible behavior. And when you go, for example, and you decide that you're threatening the life of another citizen or anybody at all, it means, therefore, that that behavior should be curtailed. We should not even snuff out the life of an animal, of a beast, much less the life of another human being that you cannot create. You can't create an animal, you can make an animal, and neither can you create a fellow human being. So we do not have the right. There is no right to snuff out the lives of other people. And we are now growing up in this era where people think that they have rights to do whatever they want to do, because the government and all these human rights people also have given that illusion to people that rights do not come with responsibilities. And there are some rights that are not given by governments. There are some rights which are given by God himself, as is suggested in the Constitution of the United States. Now, so because we do not have that right to snuff out the life of people, then the government should ensure that all people who do that, they receive the full brunt of the law. The law should run its course. Okay, so let's go back to 41 Busshead. Now, he was a TikToker located in Montego Bay. And I understand that he was a very well-known TikToker. And based on my research, of course, I do not know these TikTokers. Most of them have come to my attention just because they have died. Because even though I am on the app, I do not follow Jamaican TikTokers. And I would not follow Busshead and the people of his ilk, because that's what they do too. They spread a lot of violence, verbal violence. And if it's not physical violence, even if it involves verbal violence is still violence. and government should also put that in the TikTok laws as a way of regulating the apps, that anybody who threatens or uses obscene language, right, telling people to whatever, to their mothers, that they should be banned from the app. If you have good, decent, cultured behavior, civilized behavior, then you can remain on the app and you will be free to express yourselves freely. But those individuals who are spreading a toxic image of the Jamaican culture should be banned permanently from the app. And they would understand that they should not exercise it, or they will not behave in that manner, because they know that without the app and without social media, their livelihoods and their lives are going to be a misery. Because, recently somebody sent to me a chart, itemizing that poverty rate in Jamaica has declined. Now, how has that declined? Now, let me just say this categorically, that a lot of the figures coming out of these statistics are just because they're just not really disciplined to go and do the research, right? Because there are lots of things that would have to be taken into consideration. First of all, our economy has not grown. Secondly, the best and the most skilled of our people, our graduates, are leaving yearly and they're going abroad. So we're impoverished for that. The best of the best doctors, teachers, nurses, all of them, or most of them, I should say, are leaving and they're taking up positions abroad. So if we have 80% of our most skilled graduates leaving, that's a red flag. We cannot be definitely improving in terms of poverty rates. People are running from poverty rates. And in fact, if you ask most teachers in the United States, in the UK, they would not have left the system if the system was paying them a livable wage. But what it was paying them are impoverished wages, wages that they cannot live on, salaries that they cannot survive on. As a result of that, they had to get up and run. So that is to suggest that our economy has deteriorated. And we've always had, because some of you are going to say, we've always had, our professionals leave Jamaica. Yes, but not to the extent that we're seeing, particularly in the education sector at the moment. And that is going to result in the impoverishment of our people. It suggests that our people are being impoverished. However, what we have to recognize is that because of scamming and the informal economy, we have to look at the informal economy. So in terms of the formal economy, the economy that you see, the official economy run by our government, in the Minister of Finance and stuff like that, the economy has been impoverished over the years. It has not expanded. It has not gotten any richer. It has gotten poorer because it hasn't grown. And if it has grown, it hasn't grown dramatically. It has not grown significantly for there to reap any sort of fruits from that particular growth, if it had grown, but it has not grown. Okay? Now, if we look now at the informal economy, where we have racketeering, crime and violence, we have the social media, all these apps like the TikToks and the Instagrams and Facebooks, what they call Meta or whatever they call it. All of these are generators of income. Plus, of course, we have the vendors who sell on the streets. If they were not able to do what they do, we would have had a revolution, or that country would have been uninhabitable, because everybody would be killing off each other, because nobody would have anything. And they would seek to steal whatever their neighbors have. What the problem is, even though the jobs that are generated from the informal economy, some of which, like racketeering and scamming, are having the deleterious effect on the safety and the security of Jamaica, but it lifts a lot of people out of poverty. Right, because the people like the 41 Busshead, the same Naya gang, was building his house, bought a very posh car, and was able to build his life. He built his life up through TikTok, right, by getting gifts, and some people are asserting that some of the gifts that are gotten on TikTok, some of them might be linked to the underworld. I don't know. because they get lions and they get these galaxies, and these are big gifts, and they can be converted into thousands of dollars. My understanding. Somebody can correct me. I understand that near Gang, his friend CPR, who seems to be a decent young man. I don't know him, but I understand that he is near Gang's friend, and he sought to have raised funds for Near Gang and for his daughter and for his impending funeral service. And in the time he spent since Near Gang's death, could be 2 weeks and so on, that he was on TikTok raising funds for Near Gang, my understanding, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that he has gathered, was able to raise over $28,000. And I don't think it's Jamaican dollars, it's US dollars on TikTok. By getting gifts and engaging in battles, in TikTok battles. 28,000 US dollars in perhaps 2 weeks or more. Now, I'm not here to spread rumor, and the fact of the matter is that is what I gathered, right? What I have heard, read, don't know if it's true. But I understand that when they're ranking, when they're number one and number two, and since Near Gang's death, he has been ranking on TikTok. He has the number one spot on TikTok. So it's believable that they do make thousands of dollars on the app. So yes, these sort of, informal, job creation, that have come from the informal economy. Yes, they have allowed our people to lift themselves out of poverty. So people who, like the government, who want to behave as if they're the ones who are in control. That is why you're hearing Dr. What's his name? Dr. Horace Chang, he's suggesting that the app cannot be banned. Because if the app is banned, or if social media is regulated or banned in Jamaica, wow, the poverty you are going to see, you are then going to see the real rate of poverty in Jamaica. Then you will see that Jamaica is not what we think it is. And if the poverty rate in Jamaica had been lowered, we would see better roads, wouldn't we? Would see better communities, wouldn't we? Perhaps we would have seen a reduction in the murder rate. Yes, the informal economy, you are going to say now you're confusing yourself, you are being, conflicting. Yes, we can say that through the informal economy, poverty has been reduced. But with these sort of jobs, like the scamming, because whether we like it or not, scamming is a job, right? When they call people in the United States, it's a job that they're doing, and they're being paid to do it. Crime and violence is also an institution unto itself, and it also generates jobs and income. And that is why you're saying the poverty rate has been reduced. Yes, it has been reduced based on what the literal eye can see, but it comes at a cost. You always have to ask, what are the contributing factors? What contributed to this reduction in poverty when the economy is not growing? And people like the scholars like the Dr. Orlando Patterson, the Jamaican professor at Harvard University, that's why he wrote the book, The Confounding Island, that Jamaica is a confounding island, that lots of things are happening there. We say we're a democracy, yet we are so vicious and we're so violent. And we cannot come together to forge a unified nation, yet we say we have all those free institutions there. It is a confounding island. We say that poverty has declined, but yet still we have one of the highest rates of brain drain in the entire world, right? Or teachers, the best trained minds, or doctors or nurses are leaving in droves for greener pastures, okay? Yet still we say that our poverty rates have been reduced. Are you thinking, and no matter what numbers could have been presented to me from Harvard, from Yale, no matter how convincing they sound, if your premise is not built, is not grounded in truth, then whatever you are talking about is faulty. your conclusion is going to be false. Right? So we can say, as a result of the informal economy, let's not now ignore the informal economy, that people have been able to lift themselves out of poverty outside of government regulation, outside of the formal economy. And that is what has helped to uplift them. And they can travel and they have their cars. And many people are saying, yeah, when I was growing up, I didn't have the cars. I didn't live in the houses that I see some Jamaicans live in. Because if you know how they get it, and through prostitution, by whatever means, by whatever criminal, I'm not suggesting that all of them are doing, because even those who are on social media, there's many of them are doing it clean, right? There's not anything, but you have a significant number. We can't ignore the significant number who are doing their stuff through illicit and illegal means. And then we have the effects of crime and violence that we're seeing there. So we have these uneducated, unattached young minds, like the Near Gang and the 41 Busshead and among others, who are not educated, right? They appear not to even have a basic education, right? They might have gone probably to grade 8, I don't know. But even if they've gone through high school or secondary school, whatever you call it down there, they are below their grade level. And they have no emotional intelligence. So when they are communicating, and no one is not suggesting that they can't roast each other, but the way in which these young men, I was listening to a couple of videos between Nia Gang, the one who was unalived 2 weeks ago, and Busshead, the one who was unalived 2 days ago. And you should hear the violence coming out of their mouths and the obscenity, right? The lewd, crass, boorish language that they used among themselves. And people are suggesting to me, it sounds stupid, but that's what they say. The logic is that if you have just 10 people on your live, they are going to be upset if you roast them in that way, if you offend them. But if they have like 4,000 people on their live, all of that offense is washed away because they know that they're earning lots of money. Because the more people you have on your live, it's the more gifts you're going to get, and perhaps it's the more dollars that you are going to accrue on the app in terms of advertisements, among other things. Okay, so that's something very interesting to note, that young people will go on an app and roast each other for money, and in the most despicable way, in the most dehumanizing way, they will slaughter each other verbally. And then it seems that it transforms into physical violence. And where are the sociologists in Jamaica to be able to explore these things? They're just going to look at numbers, as people normally do, and say, oh yes, poverty rate has gone down. So it means the government is doing a great job. But they're not looking that we have 2 economies, if not 3 economies in Jamaica. But we can say that we have the formal economy, one which the government regulates, and they are, checks and balances. And you have the informal economy that is not regulated, and there are no checks and balances. And people can do whatever they want to do. And that is why we have a deterioration of law and order in Jamaica, because our government is not there to regulate. And they know that if the app should be banned tomorrow, if TikTok should be banned tomorrow, which perhaps it can be banned, because let us say it's banned in the States. If the app is banned in the States, and the US government tells our government that they have to ban it in Jamaica, they're going to do it. Because they're slaves. And anything the US tells them to do, they are going to do it. Because that is how the system is set up. Right? But now the government doesn't have any orders, any diktats coming out of the United States with regard to banning the app. So Dr. Horace Chang is on record. I read you something about what he said in the Gleaner yesterday about the death of the young man, 41 Busshead, right? So we have here, let me see if I can share with you the screen to let you see what's happening and how the Gleaner has reported this gruesome murder. So we have here, this is a picture of the man, 41 Marlon 41 Busshead Samuels. So his real name is Marlon Samuels, right? So he has died. Murdered TikToker and links to Mobe Don coincidental Chang. Well, Chang is suggesting that there's no coincidence between he and whatever family member that is related to a gang. I don't know how Dr. Horace Chang is aware of that. I don't think he should say that. It's irresponsible until the investigation has been done and complete. Then he cannot say that this is just a coincidence or there's no coincidence. He can't say that. He doesn't have access to that sort of information. But oftentimes, before investigation is done, or politicians speak irresponsibly. National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says it is purely coincidental that Marlon 41 Busshead Samuels, the TikTok social media personality, murdered in Montego Bay on Friday night, is related to an alleged gang killer or gang leader. Notice here, though, that if the act were not committed in the Montego Bay area, where it's a tourist attraction area, right? That is the hub of tourism in Jamaica. Then perhaps you wouldn't hear anything from Dr. Horace Chang, right? You perhaps would not have heard anything from Dr. Horace Chang, because I don't think, if I can recall clearly, if he uttered any statements after the death of the first TikToker that was murdered on his live, who was a recent university graduate at the University of the West Indies. And I don't think that there was any statement coming from Dr. Horace Chang after the death of Nia Gang, the one who was murdered 2 weeks ago. If there were, you can correct me. But based on my knowledge, based on my recollection, I don't think that that was so. But now that he has to protect the tourists and he has to give them this illusion that Jamaica is a safe country to live and to also to visit, then he has to get on the case immediately. The fact that this TikToker is related to someone who is considered a leader in the underworld in Montego Bay is purely coincidental. That's Dr. Horace Chang speaking. The St. James police have not established a motive for the killing. Are they going to establish any motive? They didn't also establish any motive for the death of Nia Gang. But the minister acknowledged that Samuel's connection to elements which are currently in conflict raises the potential for violence in the tourism mecca. So because they want to avoid any sort of, negative impact of this gruesome murder on the image of the tourism sector, then he has to act expeditiously, right? That is what the message that Dr. Horace Chang is sending here, right? He has to act expeditiously before the tourism sector is plunged into a sort of negative image. Last night's killing opens up the potential of a gang conflict, which we are aware of. I've asked, and I know the police are going to take every step to prevent the kind of retaliation and a war that could break out between two gangs in Montego Bay, he told journalists during a tour of Sangster's International Airport. They, the police, will move aggressively and hard to disrupt any of that. Now, this is what Dr. Chang is saying. And despite concerns surrounding the intersection of social media and violence, Dr. Chang said there are no plans to restrict use of the platforms in Jamaica. This is what Dr. Horace Chang is saying. Jamaicans enjoy the social media space. We are talkers, even when we are violent talkers. I don't think there's any systematic attempt to silence any member of it from any angle at all, says Chang, who is also Deputy Prime Minister and a Member of Parliament for a constituency in St. James. Now, how irresponsible of Dr. Chang? No? How irresponsible of Dr. Horace Chang? Right? Now, this is the Minister of National Security, and he's suggesting to us that he's not going to restrict nor regulate the social apps in Jamaica, social media apps. Because we're talkers, Jamaicans are talkers. And even when they are talking irresponsibly, as he's currently doing, he's not going to control the app. because he's not concerned that these people who are common everyday Jamaicans are being unalive, right? I remember very well also during the pandemic that there was a young man, I think was in Claremont or Monique, and he uttered some very, lewd statements regarding the prime minister, because the prime minister had locked down the country and he thought that that was unfair because he wanted to make his money. He wanted to eat his food, and nothing is wrong with that. But the way in which he actually spoke about the prime minister, he used a lot of violence. He included a lot of violence in his language and who the prime minister should go and do whatever to, and the sort of language that our young people use. Well, or young people who are unattached and also uncultured, uncivilized, that sort of language. I think Jamaicans are accustomed to this ghetto sort of, demeaning language, inferior language. Okay? And I don't care what you want to say. Oh, it's Jamaican language, it's an inferior language. If they use that sort, and even if they were speaking English and were using that sort of language, lewd language, by cursing of the prime minister, that is an inferior language to me. Okay? Now, after the young man had used this language, sort of threatening language also to the prime minister and the prime minister's life, that same night when he was in his bed, he probably had not fallen asleep before his door was being knocked on and the police came and arrested him. Because the police, they understand that language that the young man used could have threatened the life of the prime minister, a prime minister that is protected. But Jamaicans who are, by the most part, largely unprotected, when you have threatening language on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube or whatever social media apps that they're on, when they use threatening language, the police is not going to go after them. Because as far as Dr. Chang is concerned, this guy, the one that was unalived day before yesterday, that's 41 Busshead, he's not, as far as he's concerned, he's not a danger to society. He wasn't a part of any gang. But if he's threatening the life of near gang and perhaps other TikTokers on the app, he should be a suspect, or should have been, and should have been taken into, and should have been told by the authorities, by the relevant authorities, that that language, if it persisted, then he would have been removed from the app. Perhaps that could have saved him his very life. Right? It is law and order, the breakdown of law and order, that has caused and is creating what we see happening in Jamaica. That is the main contributing factor to crime and violence in Jamaica, whether it's on the virtual scene, on virtual platforms like TikTok or YouTube or Instagram. It is the breakdown of law and order. And if the Jamaican government takes its job seriously, not just by protecting Jamaicans that the government considers to be important, like Barbara Gale, or any of the ministers of his government, or any of his friends or family members. But if he takes the life, if the government of Jamaica takes the lives of all Jamaicans seriously, then when you hear threatening or threats coming out of the mouths of one citizen to another, the police are going to go and interrogate that person and tell them to stop. They might have to pay a fine. Right? We've got to get our acts together. The murder rate is out of control. And now we find it, seeing that it has been exported to the virtual world. And I think, based on what I'm seeing, the government is taking this as just another day. And we're just talkers until people begin to put what they say into action and unalive the lives of their fellow citizens. And that is what is happening. But Dr. Horace Chang is not able to speak responsibly, so he just makes some irresponsible pronouncements by saying that, we're talkers. So there's no plan to restrict the app or people's, speech. And I'm not saying speech should be free, but speech that threatens the lives of another citizen should not be free, because we do not have the freedom to unalive people. We do not have the right to murder people at our own leisure. We don't have that right. And unaliving people is now becoming a sport in Jamaica, as it were. Right? We can probably form a name for it, the murder sport. Jamaica has mastered that sport, the murder sport, murdering and the unaliving of real human beings without any remorse, without any compassion. Where are we going with this sort of behavior? It's time now that we begin to examine our society and to see that we need to get back to the basics. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. Remember to like the videos. And for those of you who have not yet subscribed, why is it taking you that long? It is free of cost to subscribe. Subscribe so that the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. Hasta entonces, see you in another one.